G Prix. Look at me. Is it Formula E? That'll be fun actually someday. Like Formula E and Formula One competing on the same track, which is kind of what they do now. Now that the series has gone largely into circuit racing. But this is not the Spanish G Prix, as I said. It's the Spanish GP. It's the Spanish GP preview on the Inside Line F1 podcast. Last race of the triple header. And the big question heading into this weekend is: can you flex? Can you flex, Sundaram? You used to
I
go to
can't.
the gym, right? Can you like
You very correctly put it. I used to go to the gym until 2 months ago. So yeah, I need to get back into my routine. I'm sure my trainer's massively pissed for not seeing me for 2 months now. Yeah, I should probably head back after this weekend.
same, honestly, yeah. I mean, my arms aren't quite big as they used to be in the past. I want to flex a little bit more, but the teams won't be allowed to flex like that. Not this weekend. That's the big storyline coming into Spain. It's not the drivers, it's not Max, it's not what Elias Max is going to be using or how disappointed Ferrari are going to be. It's a technical directive, and we have seen in the past that when these technical directives come around, sometimes they can be false alarms. Sometimes they don't have the intended impact, and they don't really shake up the grid as much, but this one could. And Gary Anderson, former designer for Jordan, a really great technical analyst of the sport, he believes that this regulation will benefit McLaren and probably might impact Red Bull Racing and Ferrari. From your understanding, Sundaram, flexi wings, like what's the whole debate? Why do wings flex in the first place?
Okay, so it's the era of ground effect regulations and rules. So there's you tend to look for downforce in several ways. So the one place where you get the most downforce is of course the floor, which you can't see when the cars are on. But then you also try to extract that downforce from other areas. And one area where teams have been exploring is especially the front and the rear wings. So if you look back at Baku 2024, you could see that teams were talking about McLaren's little mini DRS outlets when the car goes down the main straight, especially at those high speeds. It's only visible when your car is at that high speeds on straights. So little murmurs around mini DRS or ways of how teams were finding ways around finding downforce with their front or rear wings started appearing. And also a lot of attention came to the front wings, where under a lot of what do you say, pressure on straights, the wings tend to flex. And especially on straights, if that's the case, you tend to generate a lot more downforce. There's lesser drag for you to play with. And a lot of teams, not a lot of teams, I would say at least Red Bull and Ferrari were the ones to kind of indicate that. The FI did do a little bit of looking into it. And then they said, okay, we're going to increase or we're going to, what do you say, strict, a little bit more strict in terms of how we measure this is done. So in that case, this week onwards, the tests are going to be more strict to ensure that the flexing is a lot lesser than it what at least seems so.
Yeah, I believe it was like 15 millimeters. It's now going to come down to, is it five that the limit is? Yeah, it's going to be a really tough weekend for teams, and the process has shifted. And the reason why they do that is if you add a consistent, sturdy wing, you will get consistent, sturdy downforce in the slow speed corners or when you need that downforce. But when you come to the straights, it will be consistently draggy. So flexi wings offer you the chance to get a bit of both, the best of both worlds from these wings. And that'll happen less. That'll mean that the cars will perform more consistently, like the wings will perform consistently, but the cars as a result might get a little more inconsistent. But that depends on your design and how you actually manage things out. And Krishna has rightly pointed out, this could well be the last race of our no overtake triple header, which is a very valid point, my friend, unfortunately, because Spain is a very strategic circuit, one where tire management always is super important. Lots of long right handers. Turn 3 comes to mind, turn 4 comes to mind. We have the fast turn 9 section as well, and then the slow left hander at turn 10, followed by the quick corners right towards the end of the circuit. Very technical track, Sundaram. So tire management, emphasis on that, and hence the wings will also become super important because, as we've seen with McLaren, if you've got the right aero configuration, if your wings are working in the right way, your car will be consistent. It will burn up its tires less. You might have to make a lesser pit stop, or maybe you can attack a little bit more on your tires and still keep that life. And that has been McLaren's strength. And it's also a hot weekend. It's Spain. So I'm already banking for them. Like, I'm saying Oscar Piastri is going to go get a win here already.
Already,
Yeah.
see, it's going to be a very tricky weekend. There's lots happening. First and foremost, like you said, the weather conditions, and it's going to be hotter. Secondly, teams bring in a lot of upgrades for Spain. Keeping aside the whole flexi wing directive and everything, teams generally bring a lot of upgrades to this track because Spain has been largely looked at as a test track. It has
Yeah.
a lot of good combination of corners and straights. Although we have lesser low speed corners now than in the last couple of years, but it's still a great track to test out your upgrades and see how well they tend to do. And the general understanding is if your car is good around Spain, it's pretty much good around the whole calendar across a whole variety of circuits. So teams will be bringing in significant upgrades to understand if their car has improved in the areas of weaknesses, and add on top of that you have the whole flexi wing directive. How that changes the pecking order is something that we have to see. What we're also going to witness this weekend is a little test on the skid blocks as well. So if you remember in
Hmm.
Japan this year, we used to see a lot of grass fires because of sparks coming from the titanium skid blocks. This weekend, since there's a lot of grass around the Spanish circuit, teams are going to test out steel skid blocks, or at least that's what the intention is. So in that sense, there's quite a bit happening that we all have to keep an eye on, and how this kind of changes the balance is what we'll understand through each practice session. We'll only get to know a very good idea of this in qualifying, but this race alone will not define the pecking order in stone. We'll have to see what happens in Canada, what happens in Austria. It's going to be a constant learning, but Spain itself will answer a lot of answers that way.
Yeah, balance. I like that word that you used there. It will be all about balance because Spain requires a ton of that. A long straight down the middle, and it's a huge run down to turn number one. It's going to be very tricky for all the drivers to navigate that good of a start. And also, we've gotten the three hardest compounds of the entire season: C1, C2,
On top of
C3.
that, yeah.
On top of that, exactly, which means uh, clearly degradation is going to be a thing and it's going to be super important. Lots of lateral loads on the tires, as I mentioned, with these long right handers. So the front lefts will be squealing a lot. Tire stress is really high. You've got decent track. It doesn't evolve as much as in Monaco, but it's abrasive. And that's going to be a big challenge for everyone. And the more balanced your car is from an aero perspective, and the less your rear tires heat up, better it will be all around. And Spain's kind of a mix of that, Sundaram. It's hard to tell if it's exactly front heavy or rear heavy. It's got a bit of both. You have a lot of traction zones, and you also have corners that will punish your front and side, which constantly makes me wonder. Tire management, medium to high speed corners, long straights. This has McLaren written all over it, and this is where Lando Norris got his first pole position of last year, and he qualified second in 2023 when McLaren were a midfield team. It's this circuit that truly fits their concept. I think it's going to be tough for anyone else to keep up.
Yeah, of course. And I think McLaren has generally put together a good car that does well across all types of circuits. And even coming here, since it's going to be largely a warm weekend, you're going to see temperatures of around 30 degrees centigrade. That's ambient temperature. The track temperatures could be well over 40, 45 degrees centigrade. Plus the fact that, like I said, there are lesser low speed corners in the new configuration than in the last years, which means there's more high speed corners, which also means that Red Bull can do pretty well. And this is all not factoring in what happens with the flexi wing tests, but at least on paper, it looks like McLaren will do extremely well with their tire degradation and their inherent speed of their car. Red Bull should ideally look very good because they've done well around Jeddah, around Imola. Where else? Which are the Japan as well. So these are those sort of circuits where there's a lot of high speed corners. So you could probably expect Max Verstappen fighting for pole or for a podium spot as well. Mercedes, since they tend to struggle a lot with temperatures, since it's going to be a warmer weekend, you probably think that they might be struggling for the third race weekend in a row, but you really hope they've put it together. The upgrades are working, at least in that area. Ferrari, I think we'll get to know what's really happening there as well. But it's looking like a very interesting weekend. But most importantly, especially with the flexi wing directive, it really doesn't matter how much time a team loses with this new directive. It is all relative. So if one team
Yeah.
loses a tenth and another team loses two tenths or three tenths, that could really change the pecking order. How much one specific team in itself loses is not going to define what's going to happen. So you really need to look at the other cars in the paddock and in the garage to see where you stand.
I think more often than not, it's the opposite. We look at the relative gaps and we forget that sometimes the absolute gaps are also increasing or decreasing. Like
Yeah,
Sauber, they were only 1.5 seconds off the pace in Monaco, which, when you consider it, is, I read it somewhere, around only 115 or 107%, something close by, in terms of overall pace, which is actually quite good. Like the Sauber are very 1.5 seconds in the past, Sundaram. Like I remember HRT, Caterham, Virgin Racing, they were 2.5, 3 seconds
four
off, four
seconds, four
seconds off.
seconds off.
And the last team who we absolutely humiliate are this close. So it's in absolute terms, they are getting quite quick. And you could see a lot of those chopping and changings happening in the midfield too. I feel if we
That's also one of the reasons you don't see a lot of overtakes.
yeah.
That's also the reason. So when the when the overall car delta is that close, and this is probably one of the downsides of a budget cap, one of the few downsides of a budget cap, is that although you want the cars to kind of merge and come together in terms of pace, then it becomes that much more difficult to overtake. So that's also one of the things which kind of creates problems around tracks like Monaco. And then you have to look at other areas where things can shuffle you. So you have to have an outright pace delta, which is very less, but an outright tire delta. You can have
Yeah.
that pace delta turn up from different compounds of tires, or you have to look towards rain, or you have to look towards the safety car. That's when you can really create some sort of excitement. Imola, all those overtakes that we saw close to 44 overtakes. A lot of that was down to the fact that there was a clear tire offset that was happening between the cars further up and behind. Monaco, we didn't see that because there's very little degradation. So Spain, in that sense, is going to be a very, very exciting weekend for me.
It will be. And Krishna has got a few interesting comments that they've already brought the stiffer front wings, and in the temperature, the Merc tires will give up, as you mentioned, Sundaram. It is a genuine issue. Mercedes have a new rear suspension, but it'll be tough to handle something like this. Uh,
I mean, the one other thing is also for Mercedes in specific, because the thing is, if you go back to last year, Red Bull did really well in the first seven races, and and one of the key reasons why Max Verstappen won the title is because he made a very good advantage of his first seven races. He managed to gather enough points so that even when Lando Norris was trying to catch up, he wasn't able to catch up so far up and surpass him in the title. That's what they did in the constructors' title. McLaren were probably over 100 points behind Red Bull at one point, but they were able to really catch up. This year you can see Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull are very close in the title for second place, and Mercedes will be kicking themselves for the sort of points that they've lost over the last two rounds. This weekend, if it defines how a team is able to go further up or fall further back, Mercedes is going to be really hurting that they didn't collect a lot of points in the last two rounds. Last year, Ferrari did not win the constructors title because not because Charles Leclerc qualified somewhere at the back in Abu Dhabi. It's because of those three or four races around Spain, Canada, Austria, where the upgrades did not work. They made a few strategic errors, and those errors actually eventually were what mattered in the constructors title as well. So Mercedes really has to show up, and they really have to turn the tide from what's happened in the last two races.
Phases, right? As you described, you have to break the season down into phases. As Krishna and Equity have also said, struggle is what's been happening. It's a strong word, but who knows? And this comment from Equity was related to McLaren struggling on the flexi wings. It's still hard to tell. It's still hard to tell. But you look at the gaps in Bahrain, you look at 30 seconds, 1 minute to other teams, and you feel like even if the wings don't flex, they might come down a bit. But 30 seconds, 1 minute, that's a lot. Like you need something fundamental to make sure that McLaren are just not as quick as they were in the past. Driver in focus, though, it would be Max Verstappen. This is his playground. He won the first ever race of his career here in his first race with Red Bull. And he's been excellent in the last couple of years too. And his start, or rather Lando's poor start last year, was a big factor in why Red Bull was so competitive. And then again, we've seen whenever Max was up against Checo at this circuit, he used to absolutely school him. I think he once won from a Checo pole too and dominated the race in spite of having a less than functional rear wing, which tells you how good Max is at a high speed, intense circuit like Spain. And it's only gotten faster now, Sundaram. No final couple of corners, no terrible bus stop chicane. We can attack, we can go faster. And the profile of turn 10, the left hander, has also been changed a little bit. It is becoming quite quick now. So As you mentioned, quite like Suzuka with the same tire compounds, Max could be in the mix, and that excites me a lot.
Definitely. I mean, if this was the configuration from 2 years ago, where I can't remember the corner number, but then if you go back to the configuration 5 years ago, and if it was this year's Red Bull, you'd probably not put Max right up there. He would probably still be struggling, especially in the third sector. But that's all done away with, and it's a lot more flowy than in the last couple of years. So this is right up Red Bull and Max Verstappen's alley for them to perform and put it in a good spot. Again, depends on how the flexi wing tests go on and how the new upgrades that teams have brought in. That depends. No, but actually on that point, this flexi wing directive has been in place since January, and it's very unlikely that a team would come to Spain with the new parts. So you would probably already assume that they've brought in those newer upgrades that were set for Spain. They must have already brought that for Monaco, or they must have brought that for Imola to test and see how their new wings or how their new upgrades are doing, so that they can prepare in advance for Spain. So I wouldn't really assume that teams are bringing their new front wings for this weekend in itself. Teams always have to prepare in advance. So I think they must have already figured out where they stand.
And that's going to be vital. Correlation, managing the wings, making sure that they fit in with exactly
Yeah.
what you want to do. And they've been planning for this for a while because they knew this update was coming. They knew that this regulation would be coming at this point in the season. It'll be interesting. And this makes me wonder about the racing in general. I know we've sort of ruled out Mercedes. It's going to be tough. My bold prediction was that I don't think they're going to make it to the top five in the race.
Oof.
But Ferrari, it may also be tough for them. We saw in Monaco that they were capable because of their mechanical grip, because of the fact that every single team had to ride their car higher because of all the aggressive curbing. But Spain doesn't offer that. So suddenly you'll see all of McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, everyone riding lower. And we know, Sundaram, whenever Ferrari has to ride low, they end up scraping their plank. And because they do that, they've got to ride higher. And when they ride higher, they just don't have the same level of performance. Spain might be tough. And in this concept of cars since 2022, I don't ever remember Ferrari being convincing here. Not once.
Possibly, yes. But also, you need to remember that Imola was also a high speed circuit, and they did pretty well with the upgrades that they brought in there. Although they were struggling in qualifying, that's been the trend, at least in the last two race weekends. They've been struggling in qualifying, not really being able to switch on their tires. But that's working on race day. And like I said the last time, as long as the car is quick on race day, that's good sign. So as long as they can maintain that in Spain as well, and still keep the tire deg under check, should not be a problem. But I think Ferrari is one of those teams that you can't really put your money on them and be okay about it, be happy about it. Things can change from session to session. Things can change from one round to another, and you really have to see what happens on that day. But I hope they are there in the mix. There's nothing like having Ferrari in the mix. There's nothing like having a three-way fight, and I hope they are there at least if in case Mercedes is not there.
Well, if you were an F1 manager, quite like the partnerships we're seeing on your page, excellent content by the way. Who would you pick as a part of your team for this weekend? Two drivers. This could be our bold predictions. Who are you backing for the win? I said Oscar. Is he in your team?
It's difficult to keep out Oscar, but I think I'll go with Lando and Max for this weekend. Max, just for the sheer performance that he's able to extract from that car, and knowing that Barcelona is more of a Red Bull track, and the fact that Lando Norris has delivered such a statement win in Monaco, taking all that pressure in qualifying and the race. So I'm going with Lando and Max this weekend.
There's a reason why I'm not going with Lando, and it's because he's been struggling with lots of long corners. After Suzuka and after China, McLaren did introduce some small updates to the car that would help Lando Norris with the trail braking aspect, like just making sure that he doesn't quite chew as much of his front tires on those long rotating corners. Spain offers a few of them, which is where things might be a bit tricky. And we saw that in Bahrain, which is in nature somewhat similar to Barcelona. Oscar was great because of how well he was just able to transition off from the brakes to the acceleration. It's those 90-degree corners. Leclerc is by far and away the best at that, as we've seen time and again at Baku and Monza and all these other places. But Oscar can deliver them too. And Bahrain, his qualifying, what he did there in these high temperatures, I get a feeling he could do that again. That's why I'm going so strongly on him. And Krishna saying Max and Charles, kind of backing the same argument that we had, that Max is one of the best here. And with Leclerc qualifying 90-degree corners, lots of high speed sections, hard to go against him really.
You really can't leave out Charles Leclerc, can you? Because even on a weekend when he sounds so disappointed and not really optimistic, he's able to do some magic. So it's difficult to argue, and especially in qualifying, that you can't leave out Charles Leclerc. He's arguably the best driver that we have on the grid right now, especially over a single lap, when all the variables of strategy and tire degradation don't come into factor. So if it's ultimately just the car and the driver, you have to put Charles Leclerc up there at least. So yeah, Charles also there in the mix.
Midfield. Any surprises from the midfield? I get a feeling this might be a Haas weekend, you know?
It's difficult to say because it changes every week from one race weekend to another. Sometimes it's the Racing Bull, sometimes it's the Haas, and also with so many teams bringing in upgrades, what you've seen from the first 5 6 races, it's difficult to really judge what's going to happen. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But Williams, Racing Bulls,
Oh,
Haas
yeah.
have all been very very impressive. Racing Bulls, although it's been a little controversial what they did in Monaco. They had a mega outing in Monaco in terms of results. That's their best result that they had at Monaco in 20 years. And on the cherry on top is that Isaac Hadjar is perfect, performing brilliantly. I think when everyone's eyes were towards Kimi Antonelli or all the other rookies, Isaac Hadjar is that one chapter that's come out of the syllabus and delivered with so much of impact that you really have to take notice. And the other good point is that Liam Lawson has finally put himself into points. So that's going to be a massive confidence booster as well. You really don't know what's going to be happening in the midfield, but God, please put Aston Martin somewhere in the mix.
Especially because it's El Padre's home race. Aston Martin are already in the mix.
Okay, I think we've lost Soumil. So nevertheless, I'll probably continue with what Soumil was intending to say. I think he might be joining soon. For me, the Spanish Grand Prix is one of those heartbreaking race weekends because yes, it is Fernando Alonso's race weekend, but I'll have to write a couple of stats around him, and it's often not something that's very optimistic or positive. So I was going through my usual stats roundup for this weekend, the preview that I have to do, and one interesting stat for this weekend is the last time a driver who was not from Mercedes or Red Bull that went on to win this race was actually Fernando Alonso in his Ferrari back in 2013. And since then, I mean, at that point, 2013 Spanish Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton had just one title to his name, and Max Verstappen was still racing in karts. Since that race weekend, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen have taken a combined 120 poles, 149 wins, and 10 titles between them. Fernando Alonso, since then, zero poles, zero wins, zero titles. So not, like I said, it's not one of those weekends where the best of stats come around from about Fernando Alonso, but yes, it is what it is. I'm hoping he can change that statistic soon enough. And welcome, Soumil.
We are back.
You're back.
Random restart in the middle of a race. That's odd. That kind of stuff does happen to people at times. It's a very Alpine from 2023 kind of situation here that we're facing. But we're back. We're back indeed. And I like this comment that Sarika has put in that, so are we not considering Williams as midfield now? Which is interesting because I mentioned Haas. You brought in a couple of other teams, including
I
Williams,
mentioned
Aston Martin
Williams.
as well. Racing Bulls are in the mix too, and their qualifying pace is excellent. And around Barcelona, a consistent and easy car to drive will be a big factor. And Isaac Hadjar in qualifying, how do you go against it? I don't know. I just wonder if some of the midfield teams can actually challenge Mercedes at some point, and I just annoy Sadhna a little bit because she's the only one supporting Mercedes, but they could be under trouble here a little bit. Heat is a big factor.
And see, that's why you bring in upgrades. At the start of the season, you kind of figure out where your key weaknesses are. And as we continue to go to a lot of the hotter circuits, that's going to be probably their main reason or the main area where they want to bring in upgrades to, even if not completely resolve, or at least try and mitigate it to some extent. So I think even one of the recent debriefs that Mercedes had, they did mention that one area that we're really focusing on is those tire temperatures, and how being able to manage the degradation around warmer temperatures. Keep your fingers crossed that the upgrades that they've brought in this weekend are directed towards that and it is successful, because sometimes teams bring in upgrades and it doesn't really work. Case in point, Aston Martin. So keep your fingers crossed and pray that Mercedes is competitive and they've banished all those degradation issues that they've had.
It will be interesting. It will be interesting. Qualifying will be a major factor. The pit lane isn't quite the longest in the world over here. It's
Good
it's
point.
still it's still 22.2 seconds compared to what we had in Imola, which was 29.
29,
So
yeah.
it's better.
And it's one of the reasons. So there are two factors. One is, like you mentioned, the pit lane is, or the pit loss is much lesser. It's 22 seconds. I don't think so that's the smallest, but it's still very less. And the other factor is that since there is so much of tire abrasion, there is so much of lateral stress on your tires, it then means that this race is a two stop by default. You don't need to have those sort of mandated two stops around Spain, because even last year it was a two stop, and you could pretty much even expect this race to be a two stop, which means it's good for us. We get to see teams pitting twice. There's a lot of strategic stuff that can happen. And although even in previous years, if you remember, Spain didn't have a lot of overtaking, but then it still had the cushion to do something in terms of strategy. We've seen teams experimenting with two stoppers, three stoppers, and still being able to make passes, especially for the lead. So, in that sense, even the racing should be good for us this Sunday.
Yeah. And strategy will be a big part of it. You look like a team principal today. It's lovely, the white shirt and all. If you were Flavio, if you were a team principal, what would you call? Two stopper, maybe try for a one stop. It'll be tricky, right?
Two
I
stopper,
suppose a lot
one
of it depends
stopper.
on quality.
I just hope it's Ferrari. No, that's not. That's. I just hope it's not Ferrari that's doing the one stopper, because quite clearly it does look like a two stopper. But yeah, teams will have to be on top of their strategy as well.
That's going to be the big thing. Strategy. Who is smart enough to do it? Red Bull Racing are normally the better ones in that regard, sharper. McLaren have to fight with two drivers, which could be a challenge because you're trying to make sure you get the best for two drivers instead of one. And Red Bull don't have that pressure, which I feel will be very helpful for them.
Talking about Red Bull, Yuki Tsunoda is set to be the most capped driver from Japan in Formula One history. He's going to make his 96th start, and he's going to be the most capped driver from Japan. Lando Norris is also making his way up the leaderboard, so he is set to be the second most capped driver for McLaren. And
Wow.
actually, last weekend in Monaco, he broke the record for the most laps raced by a McLaren driver. That went totally unnoticed. I'm little surprised that the team did not put out a stat for that, but quite a few stats to keep an eye out for as well.
What's the point of most laps completed if you cannot win the most races? And Lando could well do that too, with the number of races he still has left in his career and the kind of position that McLaren has put him in. It's going to be a big weekend. We're not going to use the R word or definitely not the C word as well. Comeback or yeah, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. But
We've been barred
important.
from doing that.
We've been barred from doing that. Yeah, these wings or these words won't flex anymore. But what will happen when the wings do flex less? Which teams will come out on top? It's been great to hear your predictions, all of you. Sadhna, Sarika, Krishna, Equity as well. Thank you for interacting with us. And let us know what you think about this entire race weekend or down in the comments. But last question before we go. Don't you think they do the same Monaco strategies with one pit stop? You mean you mean like trying to hunt for a safety car or a red flag and then trying to take one pit stop off? Because Monaco had two.
Don't you
So
think they'll do the same Monaco strategies with one pit stop? Didn't quite
I,
understand
I,
that
I suppose
question.
maybe uh pit early, stay out and control the field a little bit. That's
That's
what.
not that's difficult to do around Spain, and this is one of those questions that even people ask me on social media. Do you think this mandated two stop rule will spill over to other tracks? I hope it doesn't happen. It's what we saw in Monaco, especially the whole backing up scenario was possible in Monaco because overtaking is difficult. And we've seen that play out across different circuits which have similar attributes. So we've seen this happening in Abu Dhabi, in Miami, in Jeddah, where generally it's difficult to overtake. Around Spain, it's going to be a lot easier, especially on the opening straight. I mean, 80% of all passes in Spain happen going into turn one, and nearly 75% of all overtakes here require DRS. So you will see a lot more
Yeah.
overtakes only on that opening stretch, but you really can't back into someone and try to keep them behind. That's not going to be happening this weekend at least.
Yeah, and such long straights. The DRS, once you get the run, it's so hard to keep up. But we will see good racing. If we do have lots of drivers using DRS that run into turn one, two, three, it is phenomenal. The corners are great. So there's a great flow to it, and you can keep fighting all the way till turn three if you've got the grip. It won't be boring for sure. It'll be strategic. Definitely not boring though. You still didn't pick a driver to win. You chose Lando, didn't you?
To win,
Yeah,
I'm going with Max.
you're going with Max. So I'm going Oscar. Sundaram's going Max.
But then there's also Flexi Week that's going to be happening. Oh, then I'm going to take the safe bet with Lando. No, but I'll go with Max. I'll go with Max. It's difficult to keep Max Verstappen and that Red Bull strategy team out of the equation.
It'll be interesting to see. Well, Spain, that's going to come up soon. And make sure that you firstly subscribe to the Inside Line F1 podcast because, as we've always been saying, a lot of you watch, a lot of you don't subscribe, and we don't like that. Come on, it's just helpful to bring more people to the community and get more people introduced to our work so that we can then have a chat with them too and make it a proper Formula One community where we're able to share all of our thoughts, insights, opinions, and just have a fun conversation, all of us together, about what we feel on Formula One. So you can start and you can contribute by subscribing to the Inside Line F1 podcast and putting on the bell ringer, and by also watching us so consistently that you remember that Kunal is not here and we need a two-place grid penalty for him. I love that equity. That's more like it. Yeah, two-place grid penalty. That's fair. That's fair. But he will be back on Sunday when we do the post-race review show, and make sure that you are there for that one too. Once again, subscribe to the Inside Line F1 podcast, and we'll see you on Sunday. Bye-bye.